I'm getting better with this thing. Okay, so welcome to our last week in our class about the wise use of technology. It's been really good to dive through Galatians 5 and look through the different ways that we can gather wisdom from scriptures to deal with something that is so much part of our life, which is the use of technology. The last verses that we're going to be looking through are the two verses that I actually did not read a couple weeks ago because I was saving it for last. So Ephesians 5:22 and 23, and then 26. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there's no law. And then a couple of verses later, he finishes the whole chapter by saying, let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another. It is interesting, we had already talked about all the works of the flesh on verses 19 and 21. And then he talks about the fruit of the Spirit. What does the Spirit generate in us? But then he finished the passage saying, let us not become conceited. The word conceit holds in itself two meanings. Conceit means pride, like excessive pride. But conceit also means vanity, excessive preoccupations with oneself. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, because the result of conceit is provocation. If you're thinking too much of yourself, if you're too proud, if you are too preoccupied with yourself, the response will be seen in how you interact with others. So two issues that appear through the use of social media in relation to body image are conceit and envy. And envy is the last one that we read in the list of the works of the flesh. But instead, the fruit of the Spirit tells us not only a way to interact with others, but to interact with ourselves. Social media is a great place for body positivity. There's a lot out there, not only in accepting different body sizes and shapes, but also it has given people with disabilities, people with different, body presentations, so much opportunity to share. What does it mean living with Down syndrome, with cerebral palsy, with silent diseases, right? People that you look and they look healthy, but people have no energy, or they have internal problems, or they have to use colostomy bags. Like, it's been great. Social media has been very helpful. Social media has also been very harmful. For those, especially those younger, whose brains are not yet prepared to do that. So today I have with us Bridget Smith. Bridget Smith is a counselor. She works primarily with teenagers, and we've had lots of conversations about it. So if you have a boy or a girl, or if you're thinking of boys or girls, or if you work with kids, you work with boys and girls, you will see that this topic that we'll be talking about today, it's really important for us to be aware of and know how to interact. So I'm going to sit down and we're going to start talking about the brain, because the brain of the teenager is very different than our brain. As a child is forming, their brain develops in a different speed, and way before they can think like we do and develop the thinking skills that we have, they're not there yet. So, Bridget, it was one of the cool concepts you could just. Did I turn it on? Sorry, my bad. It's one of the things that we talked about a while ago, way before I was planning for this class, and I was like, oh, I need to bring Bridget on, because this is a great perspective to have.
So I largely do a lot of work in counseling session with teens built process for the cortex, aka the rational part of your brain. So, teens for processing emotionally, that means everything they're taking in is going through the lens of emotion. Sorry, I didn't think that was funny, so just being honest. But I think all of us can look back into our teen years and think about things we've done and like, what was I thinking? What was I doing? And a lot of it comes down to developmentally where we're at. So when it comes to working with parents, I think largely understanding where your child's at developmentally can influence it tremendously, because I think one, you want to be validating your child from the emotional component, but then disciplining from the action behavioral response.
Yeah. So how about, take a minute, you guys know I like to make a talk. So how about take a minute, think about your teen years. Middle and high school, what did it look like? Any experiences that now you look back and say, gosh, that was dumb. Or why did I think like that? What was I thinking when I did that? It could be in relation to you, in relation to something else. So share with the person, on your side, talk for a minute about it, and then you're going to look a little bit more into the brain, and maybe that will help you understand what you did back then a little bit better. Are we good? Did we hear any funny stories? You don't have to share with the large public. So, I remember some of my own stories of wanting to fit and not so smart things I did back then, like getting home at 7 p.m. because I decided to go to the mall after school, and I lived an hour away from my school, and I would go home, and there was no cell phones, and that's precisely the reason I never had a cell phone. But all my friends were at the mall. Remember those machines that people I was a pro. And I would go after school, and I knew that if I took the 6 p.m. bus, this is public transportation, I could get home at 7:30, 7:45 because of traffic. But if I got the 7 p.m. bus, I would get home at 7:45, 7:50. My mom didn't know, right? Well, until there was a storm, and I got home at like 8 something, and my mom and dad had nobody to contact me. So yeah, I remember some of those impulsive teenager decisions that I made. And the reason why we're talking about it is because the reality nowadays is that our children are spending time now mostly on their phone. They are 4, 5, 6 hours on the phone. And much of it they are in social media. Once they get to the teen years, majority of teens do have phones, do access social media on the phone. A lot of them are accessing unsupervised social media. And the reality is that they are seeing hundreds, thousands of pictures every day, and they are internalizing these patterns. How people look at their body, how people look at their food, right? There's a research that the New York Times did. They do something called interviews, and just basically they would choose a topic and they would interview a bunch of teenagers on it. And they interviewed teenagers on social media and their bodies. And one of the things that one of the kids were saying, every time I see a picture of a plate, I wonder, why are they eating that? What should I be eating? So it's not just the pictures of perfect bodies or Photoshop or very well made up bodies that are capturing their attention and making them think differently. Something as simple as a plate of food, a picture of a plate of food saying, this is what I ate today, right? They are internalizing it. And then beauty ideals that are on the table, right? We all know about Photoshop and whatever other ways of filters and touching up pictures and whatever. But that's not enough for a teen brain because they are thinking emotionally. So how do we support our teen's brain? So let's talk about preparation, right? Before we talk about intervention, once our kid's already dealing with something, let's talk about just understanding a teenager's brain and trying to support it. What are some of the things that we can do to help them? Because a lot of them figuring out how to think with their prefrontal cortex as they're developing it is doing this with someone else. So what are some of the things that we can do to help them get there while they're not there yet?
First and foremost, education. I think one, explaining social media, but also where they are developmentally can be actually really empowering for a teen. One of the biggest conversations I often have with teenagers that are in the throes of either an eating disorder or anxiety-related body image issues is, I wish I had known. I wish someone had talked to me about it. So I think talking to your child about what their actions are, also setting boundaries is really important. The consequences of their actions, having those, I think that goes into the boundary conversation. Being on social media for 6+ hours a day, how is that going to impact your relationship with your body? Also, how is that going to impact your relationship with others? This goes into the past weeks in the course too, bullying, pornography, things like that. Reminding them that they do have power to make decisions. They're resilient, they're competent in and of themselves, but I think social media often, due to the fact that they're processing it emotionally, they're looking at it from what I need from this or what am I lacking. So, two, just being invested in your teenager. What are they interested in? What are they likely to be looking up on social media because of what they're interested in? Are they interested in fashion? Well, they might be looking up more posts related to models and things like that. You might have to have those conversations a little more early on before they get on social media. Also, just hopefully an open space where they know if they do happen upon content where they say, happen to see something and then they start questioning, like, oh, this person's posting about eating twice a day, only eating one meal. Having an open conversation with your teen about, you can come to me if you're having those conversations, or you're having those thoughts, because you don't want your teen to be associating
Mhm.
and love.
Yeah, and I think that's something that one of the advice that we've given parents already is no social media in the evening can be very helpful. A couple hours before sleep especially because it helps their brain slow down to figure out at some point where they're going to put their phones in or where they're going to put their phones to charge so that they can have that space for letting their brains rest before going to bed. Okay, so this is the research that I was talking about, the New York Times research, is what students are saying about how social media affects their body image. And it was very interesting. If you remember, I'm sending all these things home. It's available on the drive. If you haven't received a link to the drive, look at your email. I've been sending emails from KidsAct. And then you can find the link in the you can just click on this image when you look at this. Okay, the kids are there, they're on the internet, they're looking at things. What is the impact?
Yeah, so for girls, largely it is their relationship with the bodies. So there is a lot of objectification. So a lot of girls start to view their bodies from the sense of, oh, well, my body is something that is either something another person wants or just from even objectifying themselves, really, I mean, nervous, we say. A lot of them also start to view their body from more of a performance aspect. So it's anxiety inducing to make sure I'm obtaining a certain standard. I think problematic internet use, there's a high predictor of eating disorder tendencies and also the development of future eating disorder. So that's incredibly important. With males, it's a little less apparent because there is more of a stigma surrounding body image issues in that conversation, especially among teen boys that I work with. But what you do notice, typically in my setting, but also maybe it's parent, you notice in high school, a lot of the teen boys start working out, going to the gym, that becomes an interest, and it's largely focused on what the media is portraying, whether it's through social media, the lean muscular appearance ideal, the guys who have the jobs get the girls, even in movies. And that's something that a lot of teen boys start to normalize. And they associate it again now with acceptance, love, being wanted, included. So again, from like the emotional standpoint of how they're processing it, they're trying to get needs that they feel are being unmet otherwise.
Yeah. One of the things that really interested me recently, I follow a page called Defend Young Minds, and they recently shared a research where a group that is investigating this thing specifically saw they created a profile like Instagram or TikTok for a 12-year-old child. So they're at the age they are technically allowed to be in the apps. And they say that within 4 or 5 minutes of having the profile created, they were receiving self-harm content. They were receiving, body image related things, both like anorexia, or things like self-harm in terms of like cutting yourself or whatever. So it's just like we can't trust the algorithm at all. Like it's really concerning that just by creating a profile, like they're not even following much, but the profile is 5 minutes old. They didn't have time to go around and choose what they're going to watch. But just by age, this is the content that is running around using the things like age and gender, and that's already the kind of content that is being provided. So the problem is not only what's being available right there and how to respond to it, but how it's being pushed to them.
And for the algorithm, I do want to add that if your child has been exposed to even one piece of eating disorder content or self-harm content, their feed is going to generate that. And that is something that I think in the education piece with your child, you should be emphasizing that social media is a business. I have a friend who works at TikTok. He's on the trust and safety team. He says that constantly in his job, what he's dealing with is the pushback with the marketing team because they want to push content. He's trying to keep, the peace and making sure that the content is safe for children. But again, they're trying to make money, and teens at a young age don't really And there are our current policies being made. There's one actually up for vote right now. Not going to say where I stand on it, but there's the Child Online Safety Act, or the Kids Online Safety Act. And actually in the policy is actual specific content for eating disorder content, but based off the algorithm, where they want to have that removed from any social media site because of how detrimental it is.
Yeah. What are some of the consequences then? I know you already talked about eating disorders. So tell us more.
So it does body dysmorphia is another one that's constant. So hypervigilance about appearance, constantly analyzing. That ties into other mental health diagnoses. So I work largely with anxiety disorders, depression, self-harm. They coincide. They're very co-occurring with body image issues. I would say majority of those individuals at some point have been impacted by social media. Also cyberbullying. We can't ignore the fact that we do live in a society where our appearance, unfortunately, first and foremost, is often the topic of conversation. Whether that's a positive thing or a negative thing. I mean, I would say for the females in here, what is the first thing you compliment when you see another woman? It's as simple as that. It's very ingrained. But so with cyberbullying, again, with the emotional component, wanting to fit in, oftentimes if someone's getting made fun of for their appearance, or maybe you see someone who's a celebrity and there's a comment on their outfit being ridiculous or it doesn't fit them, kids are internalizing it because it's being modeled for them.
And their thoughts are being distorted. So for example, with body dysmorphia, you're looking at your body, but you're not seeing what your body actually looks like. You're seeing something else. Your brain is not perceiving reality as reality, right? What other kinds of thought distortions would a child have?
Yeah, I think, and again, kind of talked about it, but one of the biggest ones is I'm unacceptable due to how I look, or I don't fit in. So maybe your child was born with a birthmark. They don't see anyone on social media in their friend group with a birthmark. I don't fit in, I'm unlovable. Essentially, any and every thought that would be negative in terms of where our minds can go, I'm worthless, I'm unworthy because I don't get a lot of likes on this picture and I posted something similar to my peer. Those are some big ones. I think the tendency with social media is a lot of teens go to all or nothing thinking too, where it's either black or white. I post this, I get a lot of likes, I'm loved. I'm not loved, I'm not liked. And that goes into a bunch of different things as well.
So I went back to researching and trying to figure out what is research saying about it. Are there immediate things that can be done to create an improvement in a situation if you have a child that is dealing with it? And it's very clear, just limiting the amount of hours that you spend on social media, taking a break from social media, a couple weeks, can have a gigantic resource. So these specific research from the Association of Pediatrics, they saw significant improvement in how kids feel about their weight and their appearance by reducing their access to social media 50% for a few weeks. So instead of being in social media 5 hours a week, they were in 5 hours a day, they were in social media 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day. And just that reduced their feelings, their bad feelings about their weight and body appearance. So the reality is there are even little things that we may think, well, if social media has been a problem, we're going to reduce our content. And then the reality is it also proves that there's this direct correlation between what they're seeing, what they're feeding themselves, and how they are appearing. But there's more that we can do besides just, well, no social media for you. That's not going to fix everything, because so appearance is not something that only those that are in social media deal with, right? All of us, if you have a child now, you probably lived through a season where you did not have TikTok when you were a teenager. So that means that you had a very different list of online things available for you. But majority of us did have to think through our appearance because it's part of how we feel accepted by others. It's a lot part, as you were saying, it's the first thing that we compliment about someone, oh, you look good today, right? So we need to figure out how can we support our kids to help them feel accepted, to help them feel loved through the year they're trying to define what they look like, what they want to look like, to get an acceptance in their own body. So what are some of the things that you would tell parents? If you would talk, instead of starting to your teenagers, if you would talk directly to their parents, what would you say?
Education, first and foremost, explaining media literacy. Just educating your child on social media, I think, is really foundational, especially if they're young and hopping on. There's a lot of kids who get on with it. So I think having those open conversations early on can be really beneficial, because then if they are wanting to go online, they might be more likely to bring it up to you versus hiding it. That does seem to be one of the bigger problems they go. Modeling how you use social media is really important. And I think it even goes beyond just social media, but modeling how you talk about your body, or even how you talk about others' bodies around you. Often in counseling sessions with teens, one of the biggest conversations and most impactful conversations we have are about the messages they receive. And oftentimes those messages have been generational. So one simple example would be, going for the moms here, when you're taking pictures with your kids, are you positioning yourself strategically which beside your child? So if your stomach's not showing, your child will pick up on that and they'll be like, oh, mom's not comfortable in photos, or mom's making us take 20 of these because none of them are okay. Your child is picking up on things like that. Encouraging positive self-talk. I think this goes into our Galatians verse, gentleness. Are we talking to your body? Like, are we talking about your body? Are we talking about your child's body? Especially if they're an athlete too, I want to add this. If your child is doing largely a performance-based activity and you're constantly nagging them on that, or I say nagging because that's how the teens do it, or criticizing them, saying, oh, you should do this, your teen is going to internalize that in relation to their body. It's just how it works, especially because they're emotionally processing.
The whole aspect of I look to other people's. So and so did so well because, or asking questions about what's going on with so and so, they look like this. Or sometimes making a comment with your spouse or with your friend about, did you see that this person, is this big that way? Appearance comments, realistic. Or even comments directly to your child, especially if they're struggling with something. I would say I struggle with gaining weight. I have metabolic disorder. So I put on weight because I put on weight. I might be eating 1,000 calories and I'm still putting on weight. And one of the hardest things for me was my parents telling me, you're fat, you are, you don't care about your appearance, your pants are not going to fit you anymore, hearing this with them. But then I had, and Freddie mentioned that before in another class, I had a Sunday school teacher who, it was my safe haven, and I loved going to talk to her, and I called her grandma, and she would speak with me, and one of the things that she really helped me think wasn't the gentleness concept, was the patience concept from through the Spirit. She said, you were going through a season where your body's changing. So any teenager, you have to have patience. The Holy Spirit will give you patience to figure out, okay, what does this look like? Is there anything else going on? Am I going to, what do I need here? Maybe it's a boy that their voice is changing and you're upset about it. Maybe, we have a couple kids that I've been in the church for over 5 years. I see some kids that one day they're very chubby, short, 6th graders, and then a month later they have sprouted, 6 inches, and now they're skinny. And there's a huge body change in a short period of time. And then if everyone comments of it, says, look at what's going on. You're looking so lean now, you're looking so good. Like, he's just creating that, he's defeating that. But if he's like a child that is going to that, still haven't grown, or they might be feeling uncomfortable because they're chubby. And you can say, well, give yourself time, be patient with yourself. Your body is still changing, you have your teen years, you know. It's part of the process of your teen years to let your body just grow, and it's been a little weird sometimes, right? Maybe you're going to figure out that there's a better haircut for your head shape, you know, and it's okay. Maybe you're going to figure out that there's different type of clothes that you like to wear that make you feel more comfortable in your body. But like, give yourself patience. So the fruit of the Spirit really helps us think about like, love is the first thing that you're looking for. So practicing, looking at yourself with love, being content, right? Another fruit of the Spirit is joy. So being content with what you have, with who you are. I just said patience, you said gentleness, and self-control, right? Figuring out, okay, I can, if you're talking to your children about it, I see this going on, maybe I need to limit the time that I am spending. We talked a lot about teenagers, that you cannot just force a boundary with them. A lot of developing good skills with your teenager is sitting with your teenager and talking to them, okay, we are perceiving this. What do you think would be a good way of us protecting them? What would be a good way for you and I, a good boundary that can be helpful to you? So that kind of thing. So yeah, anything else? I think we have covered most of it, but questions, we have time. Anything you want to talk about? Any last advice for parents?
I would just further emphasize like the fact that just remember your child is processing emotionally. So if you see a behavior that maybe you're not in agreement with or you're concerned about, try to work backward towards what maybe the thoughts and the emotions are. That tends to be more effective. Feel free though, like obviously you should be disciplined in the behavior if it's inappropriate, but remember to emotionally coach what they're feeling, because that's going to be far more effective than just simply kicking them off social media or, you know, punishing them for something. Maybe like, I'm trying to think of an example. For example, like pornography a couple weeks ago, like things like that. Having open lines of communication, but being seen as someone who's there to support and validate the emotions, but also point out when things aren't in alignment, I think is important, because a lot of the teens I work with, they want to open up to their parents about topics like this, but they feel like they're not typical conversations that families have. And our teens just want attention and love. They really do. And if you feel like you have kind of reached your wit's end with conversations like this, maybe go to a counselor as well. They can have these conversations in a safe space, and that can bring you in, whether that's family therapy, whatever format is just for you.
So we have time for questions, so go ahead. I will just repeat on the microphone because we're recording this session.
So, let's say you're a parent and you come across a kid who is using social media in unhealthy ways. I think we're all old enough and smart enough to know that it would be a mistake to overreact and to express shock, right? Because it just is very basic. But what are some examples of positive ways to react that increase your child's trust?
So the question is, you find out your child is using social media in an unhealthy way. You do not want to overreact because that might backfire. What are some positive ways to respond to your child?
I would say first and foremost questions. So asking them, well, what were you thinking in this moment? What were you feeling in this moment? Working from that standpoint, however, expressing your concern as well, because I think with teens, sometimes they will make assumptions about what their parents are thinking. So expressing like, I'm concerned, but I want to hear more about your side of things, I think can be an easier way to get into those conversations. requires discipline, then disciplining at the same point for the behavioral response. But including them in and explaining it, I think over-communicating with teenagers is very beneficial. So there's no assumptions, and it usually goes over a lot better, at least with teens and parents I work with.
Maybe a follow-up. I guess a challenge for us, so our oldest is 12. The response I get in terms of what were you thinking and why are you wanting to do this is, I don't know. Like, I get it all the time. I don't know. I wasn't thinking about anything. I don't know, right? And so any tips to help progress to the point that you were saying about getting a better sense of your emotions? Yeah.
Okay, so a follow-up question is, well, if I ask my kid what they're thinking, their answer is going to be, I don't know. So how do you respond as a parent when your child doesn't know what they're thinking? They probably are not thinking.
Yeah, that goes into the mental piece of the emotion. I would flip it then and be like, okay, what was the emotion that you were getting from it? Or maybe, for example, I'll just use one that I recently worked with. They saw a post, it was someone else, and they didn't know what they were feeling, but they knew what they assumed the other person was feeling. So starting from that component, well, what do you think they're feeling? Okay, well, how does it make you feel seeing them experiencing that? For example, it might be envy or anxiety of wanting to be included. Working from that standpoint. Also, writing can be really helpful too. Sometimes verbalizing for teens can be very difficult because they're not used to it. Often because a lot of their communication is through social media. They're less likely to be talking socially, as we're more likely to be like, okay, give me a phone call. They'll be like, I'll text you.
Text your child.
Don't text your child, but I deal with a lot of those issues. I think we're parents to do that, unfortunately. But sometimes having them write it can be beneficial. What were you thinking, feeling this moment? What were your thoughts? I do often these things called trigger logs with teens. So you write trigger. So it's actually, what is the issue they're dealing with? What brought up the heavy emotion or the behavior that was inappropriate? Then what were their thoughts in the moment? Sometimes having them sit down and do it without trying to look at an individual and be like, well, can be really helpful. And then working from that to the emotions. Again, it is somewhat dependent on what the situation is. So if it's self-harm content, if it's bullying, or maybe they're posting too much, there's different ways you would go about it. But writing, or looking at the situation, asking about the situation where they can talk about it from the lens of, I'm not connected, but I can still kind of talk about it emotionally without even realizing it.
Any other questions?
Again, go down from teenage to preteen, younger.
So talk about dealing with those issues in a younger age. So you're not talking about your teenager now, you're talking maybe 8, 9-year-old or even younger. How are we addressing things that we might see at that age?
On social media.
'Cause just in terms of their relationship with the body or the relationship with the internet, where are we?
Oh, yeah.
Both? Okay.
Yeah, so I would say without social media, just in general, paying attention to how you're having those conversations, kind of like we talked about before. What is the first thing you're commenting on with the little girl that you happen to see? Oh, you're so beautiful, I like your dress. From a young age, typically about 3 or 4, that's usually the first thing you're hearing. So already they're associating their worth with their appearance, which is a lifelong thing. So watching how you compliment young girls from a young age, finding other traits to compliment can be really impactful. In fact, I think it's pretty rare if you have a young girl who gets a compliment from somebody else, like, oh, having you here makes me really happy. Just the presence.
Or something, I think, something that I've recommended to parents before is to notice the specific things about your child. So if your child is having a hard time with gentleness, for example, they are always being rough, what you do is that every time they do the positive thing, they do the right thing, you say something positive. it was so nice to see how gentle you were with so-and-so. It was so, like, it's a beautiful thing that you are offering your seat to the other child. So intentionality in those relationships. I think it's also important to understand that kids, since we're talking about the brain, right? You have the kids think concretely in the beginning. So a lot of our conversation, for example, a couple weeks ago about porn with little kids, is that they see something and they believe that that's what it is. So this is sex. They saw an image, that's sex. That's because they're concrete. Once they're coming to 8, 9, 10-year-olds, they're developing abstract thinking. And the abstract thinking is where you make a guess, you make an assumption about something, right? And this age between that and the teen years, so like going from abstract thinking to being able to now start doing judgment, because that's the teen years, that's what you start doing. You start judging, because now you have concrete and abstract thinking. You can put them together and then make judgments. Helping them develop good abstract thinking, which is, what are the possibilities in this situation? So your child comes and says, "But my brother did blah, 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 and they did that because they wanted to take this away from me." Okay, that's a possibility. What's another possibility? Why else would they have, I don't know, taking your toy from the bed? Maybe they were making their bed, so but let them come up with possibilities. This is encouraging abstract thinking. This is going to be very helpful once they start making judgments, because they know that there's always multiple possibilities. And these also helps us in discipline, that we will be able to come to them with the possibility that maybe there's a different reason. Like if we're always guessing the why they did something, if we're always guessing what's going on and not asking, we are also affecting the way they're developing the abstract thinking, and then later on how they're judging. So this is one way that we can help our kids in relating to themselves, in relating to others, is helping them develop possibilities. Okay, this happened because, but it could be because, which one do you think it was? Can we find out, right? Because then when they come to the judging season, they know that maybe they're not thinking all the possibilities that are there.
Yeah, and especially in relation to this body image topic, if you've worked with them on the abstract thinking, down the road, it's going to be easier for them to comprehend, especially if this is something they're struggling with, that someone might see it differently. They might be able to actually process that, whereas a lot of the teens I work with, they can't even comprehend the fact that I might be viewing that differently than they're viewing themselves, which goes into the body dysmorphia and eating disorder. So I think that is key if you're able to facilitate these conversations and parent for them.
It's 11:15, so I am going to thank you, Bridget, for being here with us. I'm very thankful for you. I want to thank all of you. Most of you have been here week after week. It was great to have those conversations. All the information that we have from all the 7 sessions are all available on the drive. The last sessions have been recorded. So if you missed the last week, we're putting it up on YouTube soon. We were having issues with the pornography one because it was super heavy. We recorded in the wrong setting. So it was really hard to edit. But these should be available, so if you want to go back and think through those things. But those informations, if you miss any of our questions, or even the first ones when we were talking about like developing guidelines, all the paperwork, all the handouts, everything's available on the website. All the suggestions, websites to look for, resources for parents in all of the areas, they're all there. So I want to thank you for being here. Feel free to share that with other people. It's not a closed drive, so if anyone has questions about it, you can also just share the link with them and they should be able to see it. So thank you so much for coming and have a blessed Sunday.
like, the kid has unlimited supply of snacks. And they're overeating because there's no balance, right? So I think there's a difference in how you like try to teach the health and what is the context? What is the family? What is the practice? And then you can make suggestions, right? Because if you cannot make it to the parent, so I then also that's a problem, right? In the sense that, so but you can start to know, okay, what are some of the things that we do? Can we go and get frozen dinners? Can we get pre-care food, faster to prepare, so they can have some, some frozen vegetables, they can lower the amount of bread here, like or cereal. So I would say figuring out but I would say sometimes parents are very resourceful and we're like when I worked with John, it was before there was a nutrition therapist I worked in Utah. And then on one of the works that we did was sitting with parents. Even though we were supposed to do interactions with the kids, we had to work with parents. Yes. How can I improve these kids' boundaries so that they are going to develop better coping skills or whatever they have if their parents are not setting boundaries? So it's the process of figuring out what is the context. So I would ask the parents what's the context, what's going on, what are they eating, what are their snacks, what are their preferred foods, like what do you think that happens when your child is eating? And it's many parents like that child is one that if the whole family is overweight, it's a not. So trying to figure out if grandma is the one that's eating and feed all the time, then mom and dad, like talking to mom and dad every time. Grandma is the one that is in charge of feeding the child. So I would say this is I will be thinking towards boundaries. I'm trying to look at what are the key boundaries. Because if the whole family is eating healthy, that's one thing. Now, if the whole family is eating and they smoke normal, have normal lives, right? Not saying eating, but like they're normal. But the child, okay, what's the key? Who is overfeeding this child? Because the president identifies a whole. Quite often it is. Right? Unless they have some sort of fiduciary like formulation. But like, okay, what are they snacks on? Don't we switch to snacks? What are their lunch and breakfast and dinner options? Can we make a switch in one of them? For example, if all they're eating is cereal in the morning, we'll talk to parents and people need to figure out a way to get them their protein in place so they're less hungry, right? Eggs, milk, cheese, basic meat in the morning. Like that can help your child less hungry, have less snacks. And then the other thing is the kid outside? Are they playing? Or are they in the computer? Or are they in the TV? Because sometimes it's what is the situation? So grandma is at home and she has 3 grandkids that she has a food pattern. Okay, then we spend 30 minutes outside of it. It's like so let's say figuring out the context, both like in terms of food and in terms of food speed. And then figuring out one solution for it. Let's change breakfast. Let's up the protein intake so we know what required to take every day. Or let's add one activity after you're outside playing physically, either in the park or in the backyard. Like something for that child.
Sometimes a boy will
if we can be strategic about what is the one change, then you will notice not to. So for example, for a child that is snapping all day long, having the lowering snacks and improving their breakfast. So instead of eating sugar and carbs for breakfast, they Because that's the hardest thing with parents. Anything that is new is hard. And you need to do that consistently to see the difference. So if you ask them to do 4 things, they're gonna feel overwhelmed and they're like, I can't make that happen. But like, let's change one thing this month. I'll see you again whenever you see us again. And then it's okay. You look at later at that time. You try to do it. This is family therapy. This is how we do things. Yeah. So 3 months. Yeah. But I would say choose to figure out like 1 or 2 things that you could see that could be more beneficial in that family. But look at the context first, because that's going to make a huge difference. A family that has the means for it, and they're stuffing their food with food, because they can get up and not make a decision about it, versus a family that just don't have food. It's a very different situation for military families. Parent who need to work, kind of situation. So looking at the context here. And then looking at this. To work at a hospital or
Is there just that insurance that
Bridget, can you press the red button so we stop recording?
The red button?
On the other side, there's gonna be a red button.